Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee. The meeting will obviously be live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Remote participants, you know the drill. Please follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting. Writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do so on your iPad or iPhone or by gesturing to me. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. Usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by a roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting, so we can keep a track on whether the meeting is quorate or not. All members should speak clearly and directly into the microphone when making contributions, and when referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus on contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. We have several really important reports to consider today, and I would anticipate we'll deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. So, moving to item 1, Claire, can you provide the Sedran and any apologies, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Got one apology today from Councillor Dryborough. There's currently 12 members present, 4 in the hall, 8 on Teams, being Councillors Bell, Brodie, Hagman, Ingalls, Lowe, McCammon, Wilson and Young. 2 members currently not present, being Councillors Giusti and Mayo.
Thanks very much, Claire. I think Councillor Giusti will be joining us, but we'll wait to see if he turns up. Probably is the best thing. Obviously, I approve the members' remote participation, so if we're happy with that, we'll move on to item 2. Do any members have a declaration of interest that they would wish to make? Nobody's indicating as such. So we'll move on to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting of the 23rd of June 2022. Can we approve the minutes as read? Happy to? Good. Excellent. Moving swiftly on. We move to item 4, the Annual Complaints Monitoring Report 2021-22, report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And we have Lindsay Turpey and Shari Laurie, both online, I think, and they're here to assist any members with any questions. Do you have anything to add to the reports, ladies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so each year we're required to publish the annual report against the set of 8 prescribed key performance indicators. As you'll see from the report, this year we have seen a significant increase in the number of complaints received, but it's worth noting that the complaints received figure includes complaints that may have later been withdrawn by the customer or determined out of remit. So sometimes we'll receive complaints that are actually the responsibility of another organisation. It's also a stark contrast to the low figures from 2020-2021, which can likely be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we did see a significant decrease in complaints due to the disruption to public services. And in April 2021, we also launched the revised complaints handling procedure, which was put in place by the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. And this was supported by an awareness raising campaign, both amongst the public with a social media campaign and also internally with a training and communications plan. So the increase could also be due to better awareness of the complaints handling procedure in terms of customers being more aware of how to make a complaint and staff members recognising what is a complaint and this being formally recorded. So although we've seen an increase in complaints, we also continue to deal with the majority of complaints at stage 1 of the process, which shows a positive commitment to resolving matters at the earliest stage possible. And we've also seen an improvement in performance and average times to respond and the number of complaints closed within the set timescales. So happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks very much, Lindsay, and I think that overview is very helpful as a supplement to the report. I've got 3 members indicating they wish to speak at the moment. Councillor Hagman, followed by Councillor McCann, and then Tony, who's in the hall. Excellent. So, Councillor Hagman.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, thank you, Lindsay, for the report. I think it is really informative, and I think we shouldn't shy away from actually, you know, by people putting in complaints, it allows us to reflect on the processes we're doing. So I think, you know, often it can be seen as a very negative thing, but actually when you take, I mean, I don't know if you're able to answer, but how many transactions do we do as a council every single day, every single month and every single year? So when you look at the overall picture, you know, 534 for everything we're doing, actually in my sort of thoughts, that actually must be quite a small proportion. I think it's really useful on page 14 that we've got the 5-year trend, but the 5-year trend isn't reflected in the overall report, the appendix report. And I'm just wondering why it's not, because I think 5 years gives you a good indication. So certainly that would be my plea for future reports. But in terms of specific questions, on page 21, we've got a breakdown of how people got in touch. And I'm just, what's the difference between the contact centre and telephone? Because they're separated out, but my understanding was the contact centre was a telephone. So is that a different form of contacting us? And certainly in looking at the complaints received by topics, behaviour and bullying, which is, I think should always be taken exceedingly serious, is sitting at 35, but then with the asterisks, actually 31 of those were relating to education and learning directors. So why didn't they go into that column? Why did they remain separate? Because I think that it would affect the figures and the percentages clearly. So that was my main 2 points. But a sort of final point, and it was just really for consideration. We've got the indicator 8 and the learning from complaints, which, as I say, I think we should always take learning, and actually, you know, that can be seen as a positive point. It breaks down the main service committees, and I'm wondering, is there any reports that go back to those service committees? Because if you're not a member of Audit, Risk and Scrutiny, but sit on the service committee, how would you be aware? You know, clearly members can access these papers, but not all members might have the ability or know to go and access them. So how do we ensure that actually the information goes direct to the directorate where it's required? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hagman. A lot of good questions. Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I absolutely take on board the including 5 years within the report, and we'll factor that in for next year's report. So thank you for that. In terms of the behaviour bullying, so this is the first year that we've been able to report on topics for the annual report due to improvements within our system. So behaviour bullying, it should actually be used for, you know, within schools, but as you know, handlers were getting used to the new topics, some people have selected behaviour bullying rather than professionalism of staff. So that's why we sort of highlighted that 31 of those are related to schools. The other 4 probably should have been classified under professionalism of staff. So we've now updated that topic within the system with schools in brackets, so that next year, you know, we're improving the way that we report on things. And the final question was on learning from complaints. So each week a report goes to, so complaints sit within the Communities Directorate, and a weekly report goes to the Chair and Vice Chair of the Communities Committee. And I know that Education certainly report to their committee, but I would probably need to double check with our handlers for Economy and Resources and Social Work. So we'll take that away to check that.
Are you happy with that response, Katie?
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thanks. Councillor McCammon.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies. Thank you very much for the report. It's very interesting. I don't envy you one little bit. Trying to pull it all together, it must be a huge mammoth task. However, I mean, I'm going to come at it a bit differently. There's a lot of quantitative statistics in there. And I would just like to know a bit of background on how we instill a culture of customer care, how we train our staff, because if we don't get that right, you know, we talk about getting it right first time. Obviously, the goal is to get it right first time. So, you know, we all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And for me, this vein, or the culture, if you like, should run right through the council, regardless of what department it is. I know there are different methods and different mechanisms for each department and so on. That's why I'm saying I don't envy your task one little bit. You've done it very well. So I've got a few points to make and a couple of questions, if I may, please. I think it's important to note, I'm sure you'll be already aware if you're dealing with, you know, if you're in this department, but only 1 in 26 people make a complaint. The other 25 won't. So for all the complaints, 500 odd, you know, you multiply that by 25, in my opinion. So we need to bear this in mind. And that's why I'm pointing out the fact that that's why we need to get it right for you know, every time. So my questions, I'll get there eventually, is what training in customer complaint handling do we give our customer facing staff? Because, you know, I've trained staff in customer care and customer complaints, and I know how scary it is for staff if they're dealing with a complaint and they've got no idea really how to go about it. And that's not just the process, the method, the stages. It's also about being empathetic, sympathetic sometimes, and just being human rather than just stating the procedure. So that's my first question. So what training is given to people who are front line, if you like? Second question is, how do we follow up complaints? So however many stages it goes through, the very end point, it's resolved or it's not upheld. How do we end it? How do we finish it? And is the procedure the same for every complaint? Because in my opinion, it should be. I know every complaint and the nature of the complaint is different, but the actual handling should be the same. And my third question is on page 21. So we list all the methods of how we collect, how we receive complaints. And I'm a bit shocked, shocked a bit harsh, but I'm a bit surprised, shall I say, that there's no word of mouth front-facing method. So if, you know, James, that's the on the street scene team, I can never say that, and a customer complains to him, I would hate to think that he just barks at them the process. I would like to think that he would take the complaint on board and deliver it to his line manager for the line manager to then follow it through. If we're not doing that, I would like to request that we do that. I just wondered why that part of the report was missing, if you like, and that method. And is it impossible to collect? I don't know, you'll tell me. But in my opinion, word of mouth complaints, the person who is on the street scene team or the toilet attendant is the face of the council at that point. So they should be collecting the information, or there should be a process, if you like. And then, just for clarity, really, it's not a question. Page 36, let me just get there. So it says that the council remains committed to listening to our customers and using customer feedback, blah, 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 blah. We continue to be represented on the local authority complaints handlers network. Can I get a bit of information of how and by who we're represented, please? And that is all from me.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCann. I'll turn to Lindsay and Shari first, and I think Vlad maybe could pick up on some points thereafter.
Thank you, Chair. So in April 2021, the revised complaints handling procedure came in place. So that was supported with a new online training module, which was mandatory for all staff. So that was the sort of first part of the training there. But we do recognise that all members of staff can take a complaint. So your point there about staff out on the street and anyone coming into contact with the public could take and handle a complaint. So we are just about to roll out a new training programme to all staff, and that will target staff that aren't computer facing as well. So that will hopefully tackle both the issue of training, making sure that everyone's better equipped to deal with complaints, and also that they're formally recognising when they do take a complaint face to face. So we do have a way to record that. It's just that we haven't had anyone say that that is the method that they've taken a complaint at this point. But I think with the new training programme and getting out to those groups of staff, then hopefully we will see a difference in that in next year's annual report, because certainly that is the goal of the complaints handling procedure, that any member of staff could be that first point of contact to deal with a complaint or to take it back to their line manager, as you say. So hopefully that answers those questions. And the other one about how we end a complaint. So really the stage 2 is the end of the complaint internally within our process. So they would get their stage 2 response, and every stage 2 response has with it a complaints satisfaction survey, which is a link to a Microsoft Teams form, which they can complete to give feedback on how they've found the complaints handling process. And they also are given advice on, if they're still dissatisfied with our response, how they can go to the SPSO and if they want to further look at their complaint. So I hope that answers your questions. I don't know if Shari's got anything to add there.
Just point 4, you asked about the local authority complaints handling network. It's where the 32 local authorities across Scotland come together and share best practice, and there's also representatives from the SPSO there as well. It's myself, Lindsay and Gillian Ainsley who attend them meetings. And just to go back to adding point 1 of regarding about the training, we have done some training with the contact centre. And just to go back to Katie Hagman, Councillor Hagman, sorry, where she asked about the difference between the contact centre and the telephone. Yes, we do get calls direct with the complaint line, and we get calls put through, but also the contact centre, we've worked with them and we'll continue to do further work about them recognising complaints. So they sometimes fill the web form in on behalf of the customer when they've got the customer on the phone to make a complaint. So that's the difference. It was to say what web forms will be completed by the contact centre and then what calls we get through by the telephone. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, both. Are you satisfied with those answers, Councillor McCammon?
Yeah, it was just really a comment. Thank you very much. It does answers them all. I just would really like, and I appreciate the bureaucracy of job. In some instances, it would just be good to ensure that we're coming across as human a lot of the time, and not stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 survey out. It would just be great if we could be that wee bit more of an expectation of just but thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you. So I'll turn to Councillor Barretti.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with the complaints first and then go to the compliments. So I'm sure everyone's talking about complaints and no compliments. I have to read this so I don't make a mistake. Can you confirm that the figure regarding compliments excludes more role-specific compliments, such as those going to SSSC? That's the first part. And as far as compliments are concerned, going to page 34 and 35, I see that there's a number of compliments by customers and an example of 7 of the compliments. Now, I would imagine that given we've had the COVID crisis and the number of complaints, I would have thought there might have been some sort of metric to show what the compliments would have registered. And I'm just wondering whether or not it's not worth going to the likes of page 21, where we see the breakdown in its waveform by email, telephone, contact centre, how those complements were generated. That's my question, Chair. Thank you. Or both questions.
Excellent questions, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think as Jackie's indicated, 1 in 26, only 1 in 26 make complaints, but it would be interesting to know what the 1 in who make compliments is as well, because I think that people are minded not to convey compliments on a regular basis. So good questions. Lindsay, Shari, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. We can add that in, certainly. We have seen an increase. It's maybe not as visible because it's just within the paragraph rather than set out in a table, but we received 141 compliments this year compared to 95 the previous year and then 47 the year before that. So we are, along with an increase in complaints, we are seeing an increase in compliments as well. So we can put that into a table for next year. And also we're able to report on how they were received in terms of phone call, email, that sort of thing. So we can take that forward as an improvement for next year as well.
Thanks very much. Councillor Barrett, are you happy with that
No,
response?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Although I would mind in what a previous councillor said about every single person being registering for compliments and complaints, how that might be carried forward, because it's not going to be an easy task. But if I'm assuming Vlad is wanting to answer my first question as well. Thank you.
If I could ask you, Councillor, just to turn your microphone off first and foremost. In terms of the first question, I'm not sure I quite captured it. I would welcome if you could run that by us again. Apologies.
I'll read it out again. Can you confirm that the figure regarding complaints, excludes more specific role-specific complaints? I think that relates to, see if I can get the page. The one's going to the Scottish Social Services Council.
I think Lindsay might be able to answer that in terms of the type of complaints that we're covering within this report.
Yeah, so sometimes they might come through our complaints procedure, and similarly we might get complaints about teaching staff as well that would need to go to their governing body. So yeah, sometimes they might come through this and be recorded as a complaint received, but it might be that they're determined to be out of remit and they need to be handled by that professional body. So they might be captured in the figures, but I'd say generally they will go to the professional body and recorded in that way.
Happy with that. Good. Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Lowe and then the Vice Chair.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Thank you. My question's from page 33, the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman figures. Very low numbers of figures that go ahead. And I just wonder how we compare to the rest of the 31 local authorities in Scotland and how that's possible to do, whether it's by percentage or whether everybody's using exactly the same system. So is it comparable? But how do we stand against the rest of Scotland? Thanks.
Lindsay?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so there is a link within there, within that page, which takes you to the SPSO's published statistics, where it shows a comparison against other local authorities. So you can see that there in terms of SPSO figures. Unfortunately, we've not fully analysed that part of it yet, but we can certainly look at that for next year to bring that along as part of the report. And in terms of benchmarking against other local authorities, that's something that we do at the Local Authorities Complaints Handlers Network that was mentioned earlier. And we have had quite a lot of discussions that sometimes it's difficult to compare the figures because, for example, some local authorities still have council housing, so they're taking on a lot of complaints, relevant to that, whereas we're stock transfer authority. So it is quite difficult to compare the figures. But going forward, that is something that we're looking to improve. And with the implementation of the new complaints handling procedure, local authorities are now required to publish their annual report by October of each year. So after October, we would be able to have, the figures from all local authorities and potentially do a follow-up report with that comparison. But unfortunately, we don't have those figures at the minute because not everyone has taken their annual report to committee at this point.
Well, that's lovely, thank you.
And I think that offer of a follow-up report would be useful. Thanks, Lindsay. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So on the back of the question from Councillor Hagman, I mean, I can only speak for the service committees I've been on, and I would appreciate if we could perhaps put an action point that we get circulated after you find out whether people do report these complaints to the service committees or not, because I think it would be useful. I mean, the service committee there is ultimately responsible for scrutiny on that particular function, so it would be quite important if they got the information. And given that it's all been analysed in that way anyway, I don't really see that it would be a difficult task. And also, I would very much, again, just echoing the Chair, it would be very good to get the follow-up report with benchmarking, because on most of these reports that we receive here, benchmarking with other local authorities provides an important tool for monitoring performance.
I'm looking at Lindsay and Vlad. Are we quite comfortable to look at service committee complaints?
Yep, if I could, Chair, thank you. I think that the first point about looking into that, absolutely, we'll look into that and then revert back to members on the current position. On the benchmarking report, I guess the question from myself is, I think we've taken on board some comparisons that we can maybe do for the next time that we're reporting on this. So just to clarify, it's for the next time we're reporting through this process rather than another report on top of it.
Sorry, if I can just come in there. Some of the things will be that we'll improve it for next year's report, but the benchmarking would need to be a follow-up report because we wouldn't have all local authorities' complaints data until after October, once they've all published their annual report. So each year we would do our annual report, and then once we had all the complaints figures, it would be a separate report for benchmarking, if that's okay.
Happy with that, Vice Chair?
Not really, actually. Because I think it's important information to have, and I very much appreciate the timeline that Lindsay has highlighted there, and until we get the figures in October. So, we can't bring it at this stage because we don't have the figures from the other local authorities. So I do think a follow-up report would be helpful. It's as to how much detail we go into with a follow-up report, it's a different question, but I do think it would be very important.
Well, I think when we move to the recommendations, we can pick up on a couple of the actions and the need for a follow-up report, and I'll maybe bring Vlad in at that point. Yeah, good. I've got Councillor McCammon indicating she'd wish to speak again, and then Councillor Dorward.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, oh, sorry, my coffee machine. I agree with the benchmarking comments for sure and the service committee reports, although we should also bear in mind that we should be the benchmark, aim to be the benchmark rather than look at benchmarking completely. Just a quick question on feedback to staff. So both for complaints and compliments, do we have regular meetings? So we're talking about bringing service committee these reports. Do we have regular meetings or frequent meetings with staff, both to thrash out the complaints, but also to boost morale and shower them with compliments, if you like, just to let them know that they are doing a great job? because, you know, it's important that this not only, you know, we're getting it right for customers, if you like, and councillors, the staff, it needs to start at the staff, like I've indicated before. So just interested to hear if we feed it all back to the staff for various reasons.
Yeah, really good point, and I think morale is incredibly important. I speak to staff on a regular basis, and they do just need a compliment every now and then, and to be made to feel valued. Vlad, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, absolutely agree, and Chair, through you, in terms of the need to celebrate that success and ensure that our staff receive that feedback. Certainly that's something that we aim to do, and we certainly pass that on. Particularly when we receive it from members, we pass that on to relevant teams, as well as obviously when we're receiving it from customers themselves, in terms of relaying that to the various teams. It's something we aim to do, and certainly I think, as you say, it's really important for morale to know that you're doing things right, and that there are people out there who obviously take that on board and are, whether it's 1 in 26, 1 in more, that actually make the compliments, that they are making that effort to do that is really important. So yeah, absolutely something that we look to do and continue to do in terms of that celebrating success for our staff.
Thanks very much. Are you happy with that, Councillor McCammon? She's gone, so she must be. Excellent. Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lindsay and Shari, for the report. It's excellent, and I think if you're looking at, you know, constructive criticism, some of that comes in via complaints, so it's really, really useful to have it. Numbers have increased, but that's perhaps due to the fact that people are more aware of what they can do in the formal process. This is a somewhat small but pedantic point following on from Councillor Lowe's question, page 33, SPSO figures. I note that out of a total of 18, only 3 were fully upheld, which is great from that perspective, so well done. But in terms of that, do we have any comparative figures for previous years? Because it isn't in the report, and I know that it might not be something you've considered, but it would be useful to have just going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is possibly the first year that we've included the SPSO figures within this report, so absolutely take that on board, and you know, we'll include that for next year as an improvement, the comparison that the data is available.
Content with that, good, thanks. I have Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair. It's been a very interesting discussion. This is another small but pedantic point. Councillor Katie earlier talked about the need for 5 years of figures, and I agree with that. But the chart on page 14 correctly shows the years increasing as it moves to the right 5 years. The ones in the report itself actually are different. They are decreasing years. Could we have consistency with these tables and reports, please?
I see Lindsay's nodding her head. Yes, I think she's indicating that we can do that. Absolutely. I don't currently have anybody else wishing to speak. I'll give you a couple of seconds just in case. No? Well, I think we've given that a good round. There's a couple of action points that were discussed that we maybe need to pick up around sort of follow-up reports and reports on service committee complaints. I'll maybe turn to Claire just to summarise before we move to the recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've picked up on a number of improvement actions which should be featured in the next year's report, which would include basically including more figures, trend information going back 5 years, looking at how we present information on complements, consistency in the presentation of tables, previous SPSO figures, and there's also been request for a follow-up report looking at the benchmarking information from other local authorities, recognising that that's not available till after October, and also to investigate how complaints are fed back to service committees on service-specific issues. Okay.
And I think there was one other point that Councillor McCann raised around feeding in of complaints from frontline staff and how that's fed into their line managers. That would probably be another action. Do we need to add an additional recommendation, or are we quite happy to take those as action points? Vice Chair, I'm looking at you.
I would actually, well, I would like to.
Yep, sorry. From my end, I've certainly recorded that a follow-up report is to happen. Obviously the timing of that will depend on others publishing theirs, and thereafter us analysing that and being able to put that forward. But I'll take that offline with the team. In terms of that further question, in regards to Councillor McCammon, in terms of how frontline feed in, I'm not sure whether that's a report in itself.
No, it's just an action point.
It's it's just for us to ensure that we're doing that, and we send that message to certainly kind of senior management that's something that was discussed at this committee, and a request on that to be followed up.
Yeah, I think it was just to incorporate it within the system so that when we're reporting in the future, we maybe have a 3% are reported through frontline staff, within that column. That would be sufficient. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendations then, and members are asked to approve the annual complaints monitoring report for 2021-2022 as detailed in appendix, and to approve the publication of this report on our Council's website, which is a requirement from the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. Are we happy to approve those? And do we wish to add a third recommendation, that we receive a benchmarking report in the future, but will not put a timeline on it as yet because we need data from other local authorities? Are we content to agree that? Yep. Excellent. Good. Okay, so moving on to item 5, arrangements for preparing the 2022-23 annual governance statement report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And I have Vlad, Claire and Fraser all available to take any questions. Does anybody want to add anything to the report at this stage? Vlad?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to give a brief summary for members, as members that have been here in this particular committee previously may recall, and you'll see that from the papers, that we have an ongoing journey of improvement in terms of our processes for the annual governance statement, and that's important for us to know. So we are constantly learning and improving that particular process, and what you've got in front of you is hopefully a tighter, more effective timeline for us to try and deal with this effectively before the various committees, and allowing officers sufficient time to analyse the information that comes back. On top of that, there's an ongoing process of improvement of the questions in line with the SITFA code of practice in that regard. So we're aligning the questions, but ongoing improvements in terms of our processes.
Thanks very much for that, Vlad. And presumably it's a sort of living document anyway, so it's constantly being reviewed and revised as appropriate.
The annual governance statement will be a process in terms of until we get to that kind of final document that we then publish. However, absolutely we'll be taking on board. It goes through a process of questionnaires to the heads of services, that then gets fed back, and it is a living document up to that point, because we're receiving feedback from, as you'll see there, the various heads of services as well as relevant committees along the way. So we take all that fully on board in terms of drafting that final annual governance statement, but it is a living document up to that point. Obviously we've got last year's one, but then we move on from that to the next one.
I'm looking to members for any questions or comment. Nobody indicating online. No. Okay, with that we'll move to the recommendations, and we're being asked to agree the arrangements for the development of the annual government statement 2022-23 as detailed in the table at 3.7. Are we happy to agree? Good. Okay, moving on to item 6, scrutiny review arrangements, report by Head of Governance and Assurance, and we have Fraser Davis here to assist members if you have any questions. Fraser, do you have anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Again, I'm in members' hands if any members wish to ask a question or comment. Nothing in the room. Nobody indicating online. Getting away lightly, Fraser. Okay, with that, we'll move to the recommendation. Sorry, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small question. We've got in 3.6 potential scrutiny review topics, but in the last council term, thanks to events, for want of a better word, how much flexibility have we got with people wanting to bring forward specific areas that they think would benefit from having a review?
Fraser, if you want to pick up on that.
Yep, so once this report's been agreed, I'm planning on contacting all elected members asking for their ideas on what they think would benefit from scrutiny review. So we're not restricted to just those items at 3.6. That's just what the previous committee had perhaps suggested be considered, but we're not restricted to that at all.
Okay, thanks, Fraser. On that, how will you contact the elected members? Will it be individually or through their groups and group leaders?
There'll be an email going out to all members looking for potential topics. Once that period's passed, the list of reviews will then go off to the individual political groups, asking for them to shortlist, which will then come back to this committee for you to decide as a committee what reviews should take place.
Excellent, thanks very much. I've got Councillor Brodie and then Councillor Barretti. Councillor Brodie.
Thanks, Chair. Just obviously, as Chair of Education, I'm interested in the additional needs within education. We're obviously having a review coming to the committee in November. More scrutiny, the better, obviously, and people are obviously. Perhaps give us a background on the dyslexic children one. What would we be looking at? Perhaps we should get feedback from other groups, which like autism societies, etc. Just want a bit more background. What you're looking for there.
With regards to that proposal, if I remember correctly, it may have actually been Councillor Hagman who proposed that in February. But no, we can absolutely add to that. We don't have to limit it to just children who are dyslexic. We can add to that if this committee can add value to the review, as you say, that's going to education in November. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Are you happy with that response, Councillor Brodie?
Yes, I'm happy. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Councillor Barretti.
Oh, thank you, Chair. In part, some of those questions that I was going to ask have been answered by the previous speakers. It's really, again, going back to what Vice Chair has pointed out, 3.6 on page 44. How will these priorities be measured ultimately? Because I'm sure we've all got different opinions. And I know that Council colleague has pointed this out, but that would be my priority. Thank you.
I'll turn to Vlad at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, that through 3.3, it lists the processes that we will go through, and in essence allows members to input into the potential topics, then there'll be a kind of short list or long list, should I say, of potential topics will be circulated to political parties for shortlisting. So each political party will shortlist those. Then that will be brought back to committee, and committee will have that final say on those topics that will go forward to the scrutiny. So that's how they will be prioritised. They'll not be prioritised by officers as such or individuals. It will be done by this committee ultimately, and that decision will be for audit, risk and scrutiny.
Thanks for that. Vice Chair, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just, you know, my question as well was, I understood that part of the process, but my question as well was centred perhaps around things that happen. So really what I'm saying is, how often are we doing this? You know, I would hate to think we go through this now and then we're stuck for this for the 5 years. You know, I think there needs to be a bit inbuilt flexibility.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's a very valid question. Fraser will correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're proposing here is on an annual basis, and what you're picking up on is what we'll do in the next year of this committee. Thereafter, obviously, we'll review that in due course in terms of other subjects and go through that process. Obviously, again, like any process, we'll learn from it, and if there's things that we need to effectively address in terms of 3.3 and maybe it may become too bureaucratic, etc., whatever, we'll pick that up and we'll deal with it and obviously propose a future way forward. But Fraser, can you just confirm that what we're looking at is that 1 year term at this point?
Yes, that's correct, Larry. It'll be an annual exercise.
Thanks very much, Fraser. Are you happy with that, Councillor Beretti? Yeah. I suppose just on that point, I mean, you know, I appreciate that the work of the scrutiny review is incredibly important for the function and the efficiency of the council. It'll be quite resource heavy as well. And are we satisfied that we have sufficient resource within your department and Fraser and such like to give this the due diligence that it merits, particularly given that members will come forward with fairly meaty issues and their own hobby horses as well. So I suppose resource is always an issue for me.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and that's full enough something Fraser and I have specifically discussed in terms of being realistic on the number of scrutinies that we can carry out. And that's not just from an officer's perspective, but from your own diaries, because that involves your involvement in various sessions, depending on what we're looking at, and obviously officers' time within that. So, yes, I think when we get to that kind of shortlisting process, Fraser and I will be very clear as to what we can effectively manage and deliver on, and what would be the gold standard that if we could get round to, we'll get round to, but we may not get to, if you know what I mean. So it's just setting out what we'll definitely deliver on, and then maybe having a list of others that if we get through our priorities, then we can move on to the next one. But then that will be reviewed next year again, so we can always look at the numbers and whether we're delivering on time.
I do like a gold standard, so we'll keep it under very close review then. Councillor Brodie, I think, is indicating to speak again.
Legacy hand, Chair. I'll just take it off.
Not a problem. Thank you very much. I don't have any other members indicating they wish to speak. Councillor Brodie, your hand's gone back up again. Thank you. With that, I will move to the recommendations, and members are asked to agree the arrangements for scrutiny reviews as detailed at points 3.3 to 3.7. Are we happy to agree? Good, thank you, members. Okay, moving on to item 7, review of council-wide risks, information management report by Head of Governance and Assurance, and we have Vlad and Lindsay here to assist if members have questions. Do either of you have anything to add to the report?
Yes, Chair, thank you. As members will know, the first item there within 2.1 is to agree to receive a presentation by the lead officer, and I'll bring in the team on that front. In terms of the next two risks that are being presented to this committee, you'll see that we've got one, the information governance one, or management, and the other one being the risk being the next item. They're purposely done because they interplay into each other, and ultimately we thought it best for members to scrutinise those together, bearing in mind that particularly the cyber risk we can discuss. However, we need to be careful as to the level of detail on that particular one. So the information risk I'll pass on depending on the decision of members, if it's okay for that presentation, which will lead us to the risk itself, and then thereafter members' discussions.
Are we happy to agree to receive a presentation? Yeah. Okay.
I'm hoping that information management, Lindsay.
I'm just patient with tech. You just got to give it a bit of time. It'll come.
Hi, Vlad. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if is someone sharing the presentation or is that for me to do?
I think it's best through yourself, Lindsay, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll just try and get that working whilst I'm...
Amy, do you have the presentation? We have
Sorry, I'm struggling to get it working.
Don't worry, Lindsay. Gotta love tech. It's all right, my laptop wouldn't even connect to the system this morning, so the joys. Right, I think Amy's trying to get it open, Lindsay, for your benefit, if you're not hearing what's happening in the room, sorry. I'm sort of leaving you a bit high and dry there. Suspense. Ah, there we go. Lindsay will just have to let you know, Amy, when you have to move to the next slide. Okay, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this risk is all about management of information. As we'll be aware, the Council's information rich, and information is one of our most vital and critical assets. It supports decision making, documents activities, provides evidence of policies, decisions and transactions, and underpins the daily work of the Council. The goal of information management is to ensure that information is looked after responsibly, kept secure, and delivered to the right audience at the right time, in the right format, in an efficient and effective manner. whilst at the same time avoiding security breaches and data loss, which could have a negative consequence for both the council and those that the information relates to. Next slide, please. This is a corporate risk, as the loss of information could result in a complete loss or interruption to council delivery, affecting our ability to support the most vulnerable and the council failing to discharge statutory functions across a range of services. The loss could either be accidental or deliberate and could cover all council services, a select range of services, or just one individual system or building, depending on the circumstances. This risk relates to all information, regardless of paper, whether that be, regardless of format, whether that be paper, electronic, or CDs, all the different types we have. Management of the risk is therefore required at both a corporate and service level. Next slide, please. Loss of information could affect our ability to provide services and protect our most vulnerable. It may also result in an inability to respond to statutory requests, inquiries, lead to fines, claims, financial loss and reputational damage for the council, which could lead to loss of public trust and also likely in turn to lead to an increase in complaints. This risk encompasses compliance requirements under the General Data Protection Regulations, Data Protection Act 2018 and Public Records Scotland Act 2011. Next slide, please. We've already put in place a number of controls to mitigate against this risk. There's ongoing work to update the Council's Information Asset Register. Our Information Asset Register is a catalogue of the information we hold and process and where it is stored. It provides a key tool to help us understand and manage our Council's information assets, where they're stored and any risk to them. The latest version now includes both personal and non-personal assets, and a date of review column has been added so that we can easily identify when the asset was last reviewed and updated. Mandatory e-learning modules are in place on records management, data protection, GDPR and security classification. Policies, procedures and guidance on data protection, records management and information security are also available to all staff via SharePoint to ensure that staff have the knowledge and understanding to handle information appropriately and in line with legislative requirements. A security classification scheme was introduced to set a common approach for the protection of documents throughout the council. Staff and elected members are required to assess and mark all information they handle as either official, sensitive, official or public. This classification then allows us to determine the level of security the information requires and how it must be handled. The council has access to an Azure Information Protection Dashboard, which enables visibility of what documents are stored electronically and the level of security classification applied to them. All incidents of staff making a data breach require the member of staff and their line manager to complete a form, which is then sent to the Data Protection Officer for their consideration. The Data Protection Officer assesses the form and advises of any appropriate recommendations to the relevant line manager, and then any actions taken must be reported back to the Data Protection Officer. Council-wide newsletters are regularly issued to staff to advise on good information management practices and have recently covered subjects such as working from home policies and procedures, the use of confidential waste, transporting of physical information, locking IT equipment and drawers, continued promotion of the appropriate use of security classification, and guidance on returning to offices full-time or to a hybrid way of working. A flowchart has also been developed which shows how a new data sharing agreement should enter the council and the route it must follow before being signed by the lead officer and the council's senior information risk owner. All data sharing agreements will now be recorded and can be downloaded for reporting purposes. Next slide, please. So we also have some further planned actions to mitigate against this risk, because we do have currently where we assess the risk to be and also a target to reduce that risk as well. So despite the recent improvements to the Information Asset Register, this is a sort of ongoing task, and the Information Asset Register requires further development to ensure that all key assets are identified within the register. This work will be addressed through the Information Strategy Implementation Programme. The register needs to receive regular scrutiny at Information Management Group to identify and mitigate any areas of risk. We continue to send out regular reminders to staff on keeping the register up to date and are looking for ways to identify how we can embed the updating of the register into regular practice. Information governance covers learning that is mandatory for all staff. We're working on how we can make this both more accessible and relevant to staff, including those that have no access to a council device. We're looking to encourage an annual refresh of all information governance related flow courses to keep staff's knowledge up to date and relevant. We'll also look to make the guidance available on SharePoint more accessible and to ensure that related policies are linked by subject area. A new data protection contingency plan has been put in place that gives an appropriate response to be followed should a large-scale data breach occur. This will include a comms plan detailing the information to be given to customers if such an event was to occur. A report was taken to Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee in March 2022, detailing the intention to produce a new business continuity policy by quarter four in 2022-23. This will ensure that all services have disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans in place, and that these include records and information management and link up to our Information Asset Register. More information will be given in the report, which is to follow by Chris Edgar in relation to cyber security, but we will also work with colleagues to make use of the Azure Information Protection Dashboard to identify any areas of risk and mitigate these. We're looking to migrate all corporate users to Office 365 from the file shares such as the G Drive. And we're also working with external partners to identify and implement appropriate information governance controls within Microsoft 365. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Many thanks, Lindsay. It's obviously a very comprehensive piece of work and thank you for it. Incredibly important as well for protection of staff and public confidence. So I think that was a really valuable presentation. I'm looking to members for any questions or queries or comments. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. It's very encouraging. It's quite a thorough piece of work here. My question is going to, because I'm one of the people who's potentially never quite got over the roads contract fiasco, where background information was lost. So really where I'm heading with this is, we've got a process in here for maintaining data, but does it go as far as working papers? Because I know we had for a while, people were creating journal entries based on spreadsheets, which were no longer available. And what I'm trying to find out is how deep down in the data are you going to with this?
I'll turn to Vlad first and then Lindsay if she wants to pick up on anything else. Vlad.
Yeah, I think this part of the ongoing learning and development that we've got and actions is that improvement of how we store our information. Within that, there'll be records management policies and retention periods that need to be maintained, and there's particular areas we'll have specific retention periods for their particular pieces of work. So as an example, some adoption papers, for example, if we're involved in that through social work, might be over 100 years retention periods because of the relevant person being able to try to access those details in the future. So it's very specific to the area, but those retention periods policies need to be reviewed and also maintained, and ensuring that we carry out the policy, which is the most important part. So that's where Lindsay's team is crucial in terms of leading us as an organisation, ensuring that the policies are in place, ensuring that they're being complied with, and giving guidance along the way to ensure that security that you talk about, that in essence things are being stored in the right place and in the right manner, and that's part of the policy.
Thank you for that. No other members indicating they wish to speak? And thanks again for that, Lindsay. As I say, very comprehensive and a big piece of work, and I've no doubt. If we move to the recommendations, we've already agreed and received the presentation. So moving on to recommendation 2, to note the existing measures in place and planned actions to manage the Council's information management risk as detailed in Appendix 2, and consider whether these are sufficient. Are we happy to note and consider at this stage that they're sufficient? Yeah. And 3, consider the implications of the information management risk on council activities. I think we've considered those. Yeah, good. Okay, moving on to item 8, and as with the previous item, we'll need to agree to receive a presentation from Chris Edgar on the review of council-wide risks, cyber security. Are we happy to agree to recommendation 1? Yep. Okay. So we'll turn to Chris, who will take us through cyber security. And hopefully the presentation will just upload beautifully this time. Famous last words now?
No, it's there. It's
good.
there.
Oh, so it is.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, excellent. Okay, thanks for letting me come along this morning, Chair and Vice Chair. Very much this risk complements the previous list with Lindsay, and it's something that I think personally I'm very passionate about, and I know Lindsay and the team are also. So next slide, please, Amy. Okay, so why do we do it? Cyber has always been seen as the if you like, the IT of the business or of the council. And a bit of context for us, around 3 million malicious sites or activities were taken down by the UK government, NCSC or GCHQ in 2021. Of those, are some specific government numbers up there for you. But more importantly, it's around the cost to the UK and the cost to the council, and obviously the numbers are there. When we talk about this, when we talk about activities and directed at public sector, what we're actually talking about is malicious campaigns. For example, somebody sets up a fake council website, or somebody sets up a fake benefit claim and try and impersonate the face of Galloway Council. These are the ones that were taken down. There was clearly other ones that were missed, but from there we can see the scale of it. Next slide, please, Amy. And why do we do it from a more personal and direct approach? For the council, certainly it's the heart of the region for everybody. We inadvertently touch everything and everybody that comes in contact with us. If it comes to council tax claims, social work, benefit claims, roads, we have everybody's information. We have specific information, and we do a lot of different detailed approaches and different activities. And it covers everybody. And from our perspective, it's also about due diligence and public trust around that we take it seriously, we look to secure systems, and this is the scale of the type of systems that we have and where we're going with them. Next slide, please, Amy. So who are we looking at? Who attacks us? For us, it's everybody. Everybody wants a pop at the council, everybody wants a pop at UK public sector, be that criminals, hackers, political activists, terrorists. Actually, for us, though, the biggest risk for us comes not from the people that want to do us harm, but from the inadvertent actions of staff. Human error for us is a big risk, and it's not malicious. We don't see a lot of that at all. We see a lot of human error. Everybody's human, everybody's fallible, and for us, that's where one of the big risks comes from. Our next slide is on, what does it look like for us? It's typical to what we see across the public sector and what we see at home and individual lives. There's spam emails, there is malicious websites, there are malware, there's crypto mining. for example, that SEPA got hit with back in 2019. These are just typical examples of what we see, and these are the ones. Majority of the time, it's email, or it's a malicious website, or it's a link that somebody's misclicked. And again, it comes back to human error on a lot of this. Next slide, please, Amy. Okay, so what are we doing about it? For me, the reason why I'm sitting here today and the reason why we're doing a presentation on this is because we have buy-in from the top, from the council. It's a cyber risk, it's a corporate risk, and we give it due diligence, and obviously we give it the attention it needs. The top one there for me is the most important for us. This notion of cyber and IT being a dark art or being smoke and mirrors, we need to absolutely lose that, and that's a more general point across industry. But we need to lose that, and it's actually shared responsibility for cyber. We all have a shared responsibility, we all have investment in this, and we all have due diligence to look after our systems and act appropriately. And for us, culture is actually the biggest thing that we've worked on, and we've started to change. Getting back to what the department, getting into doing the flow courses, making people aware of what's out there, and making them appreciate what damage can be done, and what the actions are, and how to keep themselves safe. For us, that is the biggest thing. It's humans and colleagues that keep us safe, ultimately. The technology side of things for us is actually relatively easy. We have good practice, we have good UK guidelines that we stick to. We have to keep up to pace with the attacks that happen, and we always have to increase that and change as we go. But actually, for us humans and staff and colleagues are the one that are our biggest asset in this one. We also have things like backups. Again, these are given activities for us. We have access to things like UK Gov Good Practice. We have a lot of cyber experts in the UK that we liaise with. We share our information, and we look to build systems now with the least access or least privilege necessary. So traditionally, a lot of companies or councils would give everybody access to a system because that was just the easiest way to do business or to achieve the goal of the system. Whereas now we're starting to come back to a level of almost like a need to have access. We find that quite effective, and actually that actually gives us quite good coverage of who's got administrative access of systems and who hasn't. And and one of the other ones we find also helpful for us is to embed the cyber good practice with procurement. We find that if we can get in early with procurement and departments, and we can give them cyber, if you like, standing guidelines that are a pass-fail, then we start to weed out a lot of systems that might come in under the radar for us. So we've seen some quite good gains with procurement also. And as Lindsay said previously, we do a lot of staff training. We send out newsletters, and we look to be honest, engage with staff. When we see an incident, we look to speak to them on a human level almost and understand what was going on. Because ultimately what happens for us is somebody will be having a really bad day, and it will be that time when you've got bills to pay, or you've been stressed at work, or something will happen, and you'll get that email or you'll get that link, and that's ultimately the time you click it. So ultimately, my team, talking to staff and understanding what was the thought process, and again, just that engagement, seems to help and goes a long way. Next slide, please, Amy. So these are our future plans. We have done some, we're working through others, and others are in the pipeline. One of the biggest ones for us is USB storage devices. Where appropriate, we've removed them. In this day and age with Teams and 365 and Microsoft and OneDrive, there's no need for them. So where appropriate, we've removed them. We are constantly refreshing our controls. We are constantly looking for good practice, and we're constantly discussion with our security partners, the Scottish Government and UK Government, to improve what's out there and to improve our approach to systems. We also are looking to diversify our systems, so our main corporate systems we've diversified out to cloud computing. Therefore, the risk, if we have an incident within the council, the risk of every system being taken down now is significantly reduced, because we're looking to remove the systems from the council network and put them to an appropriate cloud. And also for us, we're also in the process of moving our data centre to the cloud. That's a whole topic in itself, if you like, but from a cyber perspective, it gives us more oversight, it gives us more tools available, and it gives us more opportunities secure systems and data and ultimately access for files, information, data and systems as one. Next slide, please, Amy. And again, happy to take any questions on that.
Thanks very much, Chris. And yeah, you are very passionate about the brief, and it's an incredibly interesting one, actually, from our perspective. Before I turn to other members, probably just a few observations from myself. And again, like the previous report, it's about protecting staff, enhancing public confidence in what we do, and just sort of minimising risk. And I suppose for me, it's how do we balance the security risks against fair access? You'll know I've had issues with accessing certain platforms that are used by Scottish Government and UK Government, but our security system blocks them. So I suppose it's understanding, as I say, the need for minimising the security risk, but ensuring that we have fair access to do our jobs and staff to do their jobs. And with that, I would say that I think we have a very high level of security in Dumfries and Galloway, which is good. And compared to colleagues across Scotland and other councils, I certainly can't access things that some of them can, but that on the other side can be a bit of a limiter as well. So it's sort of identifying how we get to or acknowledge what is a risk and what is a reasonable risk. And an example of that would be that we're trying to empower our community councils to move more to hybrid style working and enabling them to use Zoom, but we're not able to access Zoom on our devices. So, it's just understanding how we do that big picture, managing security risk, but not impeding, community engagement and fair access to certain platforms, I suppose. So that would be my starter for 10, but thanks very much for the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Ultimately, you're right. Ultimately, that's a modern approach that we need to take. We, as I said in the presentation, we need to rip up the rule book around that, IT. IT is not the activity it was in the 1980s or early 2000s or 1990s. The world has fundamentally changed, and we need to fundamentally change with that. And again, the idea of IT being smoke and mirrors is not a concept anymore. To address your point specifically, we absolutely need to get to a point where we have appropriate security controls and investment in the things we care about, to put it bluntly. We have, in my presentation, we have a multitude of access in the council, a multitude of people and a multitude of systems. And from a cyber perspective, we don't care about all of them. From the accessibility and usability perspective that you've mentioned, this is where the two come together. So if we have staff that don't actually need access to our crown jewels, then we can be a bit more liberal in what we allow them to do or what we allow them to access. Conversely, if we have staff that do have access to those crown jewels, then we have to be a bit more stringent on what they can access and what they can use. But we need to ultimately find that middle ground, because cyber's actually an enabler. It should be an enabler to allow you to do your job in the most effective ways you can whilst keeping you safe. And ultimately treating everybody the same isn't the answer. So we need to look at that. We are looking at it, and we will build that into our IT plans and our IT projects going forward. But that's the way. That's the answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I suppose just on the back of that, because you said the word investment, and I think that's absolutely pivotal. We have a digital strategy, and contained within that is cybersecurity. What resource are we requiring potentially in that investment? Because it's certainly something that the Vice Chair and I are very interested in, is seeing the development of a really proactive digital strategy in Dumfries and Galloway and containing that within it. So any pointers as to what level of investment might be required?
Thanks, Chair. So I don't have that to hand, and that's not something I've been directly involved in. But what I can tell you is we have made a significant investment in our cloud infrastructure. I think was brought to a previous committee. Within that, there's a lot of additional cyber activities and cyber tools that we've got access to. But happy to take that offline and come back to you.
I don't have any other members. Oh, Councillor Barretti. Sorry.
What a huge topic this is. On some of what Chair has said, Yeah, my first first contact with malicious software and malicious attempts on computer were about 22 years ago, and it's just gone haywire since then. One thing I would like is, I think, Chair, my questions are probably multiple, not just one. First is, in context of the damage that we are seeing, I would like to see also a global perspective, because if I'm not mistaken, something you can confirm, there's 1 trillion malware or phishing or damaging attempts made each day globally. That is something which a lot of people may not be aware of, and the vast majority of these, and I would say 99.9999%, are done by artificial intelligence and not by individuals. So that is something that we need to get our heads around, and all agencies need to get their heads around. Plus, let's say my concern, and I've seen this over the last 7 or 8 years engaged in community work, is the difficulty that governance, whether regional councillors or community councillors, have in getting this across to their constituents. And I personally know of many people who have been targeted by phishing attempts and have lost substantial sums of money. I noticed on page 93 where you've got the images, not clear to me, but I'm assuming that the school uniforms, half is fake and half is correct. Now, that is if that is correct, then that is something that we're going to see an awful lot of in the next few months, where, and I've already seen 2 in my personal email box of phishing attempts to tell me that I should be seeking council support for reduction in tax. And I was thinking, oh, that's brilliant. I should really ask my leaders how I could attempt that. But I was certain it was phishing, so I passed it off. And within a week of being a councillor, I received my first phishing email through the council and passed it duly on to the authorities and never heard anything about it. So, you know, that's not good enough, because if we are getting stuff, there should be someone emailing or at least coming round and saying, look, these are the sorts of emails you're getting. And I know that our recent CEO has also been targeted, which is not unusual. So there's an awful lot of stuff there. And I think we're going to be an awful long time in getting on top of all of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beretti. Chris, do you want to pick up on some of those points? And I think you're absolutely right about the sort of weird emails that we get, and we report them in, we forward them on to BTS, and they say, yes, it's a scam, don't touch it. Where does that report into, and where would we see that data? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, so to address a couple of points, I guess, specifically in starting off with email, we've recently rolled out a report button within Outlook, so everybody should have that, and if it isn't there, then I can take that away and look at it. The email comes in, it gets reported. 2 things happen at that point. One, it goes to Microsoft, and they use it, they analyse it, and they improve their filtering, they improve their detection, and they improve their analysis from there. The second one is it comes into us within the IT department, and we have a dashboard where it gets logged as to who it came from, what it is, and what it looks like, and then we look for trends to see if it's something that's a one-off instance, or it's something that's hit the council and it's hit a number of staff, and we're seeing a lot of people clicking on it, and obviously from there it dictates what our next action would be from there. We have done in the past, and to be honest, it's something we can do again. It's not something we don't do. It's just finding to fit it in with the communications that come out with in conjunction with Lindsay's team. We take examples of emails and we email them to all staff of what threats we're kind of seeing and what we're looking and what's coming in as an awareness campaign. There's maybe an argument to say we do more of that, but certainly that's an activity we do, and I can look at that again.
You want to come back in, Councillor Beretti?
Yes, but my first point, so that we can all get an idea of the scale of this globally, how many attacks globally per day, because it is truly a staggering number. And although we know what we have here, it puts into context what is actually happening on a much bigger scale. It's not just us, and it's not just Scotland or England or Northern Ireland or Wales, it's everybody. And it's not, these cannot be humans, these are automated machines that are doing this. So there's a concentrated, deliberate attempt to disrupt the economies of all nation states. And we're part of it.
Chris, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We are. Ultimately, we are a symptom of a connected world. We see hundreds of thousands, if you say trillions, the number's infinite. A lot of it is automated, a lot of it is botnets, if you like. They're indiscriminate. A lot. When you look at the stats from a global perspective, there's a certain traffic that is ultimately targeted at national infrastructure or governments in the world or certain organisations that want to be targeted. A lot of the rest of the traffic that everybody else gets hit with, and that could be us as a council, it could be me at home, it could be anything, is collateral damage from that. So a lot of the warnings everybody sees around smart TVs or smart toasters or fridges or whatever it may be, ultimately the majority of them are responsible for it if they become infected. So we find that there's a undisclosed network around the world of people's appliances or people's computers or people's phones that have been infected, and then they're used to attack either individuals or companies. But ultimately, a lot of traffic we see is collateral damage from that. And ultimately, with a lot of attacks that are successful, there's always, and it comes back to the point again, there's always collateral damage, from there. So it might not be us that gets attacked. For example, SEPA got attacked, and we're impacted at that point, and we're not necessarily the main issue from there.
Councillor Beretti.
No, that's good that you've brought up the smart appliances, because I think most of us are still trying to grapple with our particular mode of doing things, but in the future we're going to be going more towards a smart technology, and that is much more open to criminals attacking it because they're not proofed against cyber espionage. Well, I'm quite happy with the responses, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other members wishing to speak, but I think maybe just going back to one of the earlier points, how do we see the reporting mechanisms for attacks or malicious emails, or where's that reported through? Which committee, which process, I suppose?
Thank you, Chair. So a report gets taken to the Information Management Group, and we discuss, because we have so many attacks, and clearly not all of them are successful, we have to be very careful on what we report on, because we could artificially inflate the figures for artificial inflation's sake, and that's not right. So we have to be very clear on what we take as an attack and what we take as something that has fundamentally affected our council's operation. But we do take reports up to IMG, and we take associated cyber risks or cyber incidents that need discussion.
Vlad?
Yeah, and Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, but the process for the governance there is Information Management Group, and then thereafter SLT and CMT would be cited on that reporting mechanism, and obviously if it needs to be reported up to committees, it would. I think Chris's point is a valid one, and I think Councillor Benetti's point of we are constantly under some form of attack of whatever it is. However, it's about the reporting of those that we see as a potential issue at that point in time for us, because we have a as you've stated, high-level security, which protects us against that. So, in effect, we've got that wall that's constantly protecting us, and every now and then one will filter through, and those are the ones that we need to watch out for, but we're constantly under that threat. I think that's a valid point also just to note for members in terms of the target risk rating in terms of being the same, and Chris and I have certainly discussed that through that information management group, and it's just recognising that every step we take forward, obviously those that are out there trying to attack us will take also steps forward, so we'll be constantly in that kind of target risk level that we will ultimately have to remain at, and it's not one that we're going to drastically resolve.
Yeah, no, that's been an interesting discussion, and it's a very interesting subject, and it's the world we live in. We all utilise technology now in a way we never have before, and will continue to do so. So thank you very much for the report. Moving to the recommendations, we've obviously received the presentation. We have to note the existing measures in place and planned actions to manage the Council's cyber security risk as detailed in Appendix 2, and consider whether these are sufficient. Are we happy to note? Yeah. And consider the implications of the cyber security risk on Council activities. That's what I think we've considered. Thanks very much for your time, Chris. Okay, moving on to item 9, update on the external audit plan for 2021-22, report by Head of Finance and Procurement. And we have Joanne Brown from Grant Thornton and Gillian Ross here to assist members. Gillian, Joanne, are you there? Yeah, perfect. Do you have anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report from myself, Chair, just unless Joe would like to add anything.
Thanks, Gillian. Joe?
Just a couple of brief points from myself, Chair. So I'm the external audit partner for the Council audit. And in terms of the papers, we've just reshared the audit plan just for the committee's information. Conscious there's some new members that won't have seen the plan that came in March. We haven't changed our audit risk assessment. Our significant audit risks remain the same. And the progress paper we've attached just outlines the delay to the audit timeline, just down to our resourcing. The Council produced a set of unaudited accounts by the end of June, and the audit's now taking place this month and next, and will come to yourself at the end of November for sign-off alongside our final annual report to members. The only other thing to highlight within the progress paper is as part of our audit planning, we do a number of inquiries where we look at accounting estimates and the Council's arrangements. That's been agreed with officers, and we'll circulate that to yourself, Chair, just in case there's any omissions that you're aware of as a committee, and we'll do that in due course. But nothing in particular to flag other than those points, and I'm happy to pick up on any questions.
Thanks very much both. Vice Chair, do you want to?
Yes, I would like to come in on this, and it's more a case of expressing my disappointment, to be honest. The audit plan, it's fine. I'm happy enough with that. I just find the fact that we have to submit these accounts by the end of November, and we're basically getting them on the 29th, so, which is more or less implying that this committee is a rubber stamping committee. You know, we've got to sign it off, and I understand your reasons, Joanne. You know, lots of places are struggling, but to me, it just it seems a bit short notice, and for us to sign off, and then equally, what maybe Gillian can come back, or Vlad. You know, what are the consequences if we don't approve these accounts by the end of November?
I'll look to Joe first.
Yeah, I can appreciate the point around the timeline, and we liaised obviously with the governance services in terms of when best to put the meeting in. We will obviously at the committee itself talk in detail around our annual report, and we will make sure that paper shared 2 weeks in advance in accordance with your paper timeline to give members as much chance as possible to read our report. We do have a mechanism if there was anything fundamental arising from our audit work that we would be able to raise that through Gillian and Paul, and then escalate that if needed to the chair of this committee. That's not something we've had to do in the past arising from the external audit process, but that route of escalation is there for us. In terms of the deadline, a number of local authority audits are running late this year, and a number, I think, potentially may miss the November deadline. If that deadline was to be missed, it impacts on when you're able to publish your audited accounts online. In short, the only consequence is it's something that we would have to flag in our annual report. I don't believe there's any other consequence other than a reporting matter, but it is something we are keen to avoid and sign the accounts by the end of November, and that's why we put in place the audit committee for the end of November to allow us to do that. And our audit timeline, working closely with the finance team, will allow us to complete our audit in that time frame.
Thanks, Jo. Vlad, do you want to add anything?
No, thank you, Chair. I think Jo's covered that in terms of the process and ultimately what would happen if they weren't signed off. So I think that's hopefully answered that.
It was something that certainly concerned me, that I think we're actually just going to be agreeing the accounts the day before that they're due for submission, and it doesn't give a great opportunity for any issues to arise, and if there were any other potential delays through Grant Thornton, that that could actually extend that timeline as well. So I suppose from our point of view, it's just managing that risk and reputational risk to the council, appreciating that the scenario that we're in, probably Scotland-wide with pressures on various businesses, but I think it's something we need to manage better in the future, would be my suggestion. Any other members wishing to come in at this stage? No? No. Okay, thanks, ladies. With that, we'll move to the recommendations, and we're asked to note the external audit update paper provided at Appendix 1, highlighting the Council's audit of the 2021-22 annual accounts will now commence at the start of September, with the audit due for completion at the end of November. And 2, to note the external audit plan for 2021-22, provided as Appendix 2 and as previously scrutinised by this committee in March 2022. Happy to note? Excellent. Okay, I don't have any other business. Sorry, Chair, Vice Chair, yeah.
Yeah, could the Joint Safety Committee?
That was in a minute.
Is it worth mentioning now? There were a member short.
Oh, right, yes. We picked up on the minute. We should maybe have taken it at the minute. We're still a member short for the Joint Safety Committee. So we maybe need to put that on the agenda for the next committee, or as an action, email out to the appropriate group leader for their representative. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, thank you. I should have taken that under the minute. With that, I don't have any other business deemed urgent. Thank you all for your attendance and your contributions today. And I might get lunch now. Thank you.